Did you know that most of what you've seen, read, or heard about Billy the Kid is untrue? My name is Gail Cooper. I'm a medical doctor and forensic psychiatrist. My specialty is murder case consultation for the defense. For 20 years, I've used my expertise to uncover the real Billy the Kid. Researching over 40,000 pages of archival documents and books, I've written the revisionist history. It's shocking, it's liberating, and I've written books demolishing the hoaxes, hijacking the history. My talks will share with you what I've found. Cover-ups, misinformation, and fakery, to use Old West lingo, will bite the dust. This continues my talks from my book, Billy the Kid's Writings, Words, and Wit. This one is about Billy Bonney's famous letters written in 1879, bargaining for a pardon from New Mexico Territory's Governor Lew Wallace. 2 went to Wallace and 1 to Justice of the Peace John Squire Wilson. I also authenticated a 3rd letter to Wallace. It's in another talk, and the pardon bargain itself is discussed with my book, The Lost Pardon of Billy the Kid. As background, after the Santa Fe Rings Lincoln County War atrocities, ring-shielding President Rutherford B. Hayes merely scapegoated ring-eyed Territorial Governor Samuel Beach Axtell by replacing him with Civil War General Lew Wallace. Unaware of President Hayes' sellout, New Mexico Territory citizens hoped for a new era of justice. No one imagined that Wallace himself intended to avoid confronting the dangerous ring. His strategy was pretending that Lincoln County's troubles had been caused by general outlawry. He would then capture and hang outlaws. Soon after his October 1st, 1878 arrival, the ring helpfully gave him an outlaw list. Of course, they were mostly anti-ring regulators. Billy, as the Kid, was number 14. Wallace, however, procrastinated. He didn't even visit Lincoln County. On November 13, 1878, he simply issued an amnesty proclamation for everybody involved in the war, hoping that would settle things. It did not. Susan McSween, the intrepid widow of attorney Alexander McSween, the ring-murdered leader of the freedom-fighting faction in the Lincoln County War, took action herself. She hired a Las Vegas, New Mexico attorney named Houston Chapman to prosecute Fort Stanton's ring-eyed commander, Nathan Augustus Monroe Dudley, for intervening illegally in the Lincoln County War battle to enable the murder of her husband and arson of her home. But when attorney Houston Chapman came to Lincoln to meet with Susan McSween, he was murdered on the night of February 18, 1879. The killers were local ring boss James Dolan with his outlaw henchmen Billy Campbell and Jesse Evans. Added was Dolan's sadistic setting fire to Chapman's body. Billy was an eyewitness, having been present with Dolan to negotiate local peace. In response to that latest ring atrocity, Lew Wallace merely increased his efforts to capture his fictional outlaws with Fort Stanton's troops and Lincoln County's current sheriff, George Kimbrell. Ringites apparently red-flagged anti-ring zealot Billy as an exceptionally bad outlaw, so Wallace offered the astronomical reward of $1,000 for that teenager. That's $10,000 in our day. Then Wallace reluctantly left Santa Fe to come to Lincoln in March of 1879. In Lincoln, Wallace faked activity by interviewing locals about rustling. Meanwhile, brave Susan McSween hired murdered Chapman's office mate, attorney Ira Leonard, to continue her case against Dudley. Wallace was about to crash into a wall of reality. Just then, on what is thought to be March 13, 1879, Wallace got a lucky break. It was a letter from Billy Bonney, the outlaw he knew from the Rings list as the Kid. Billy offered to testify as an eyewitness against Houston Chapman's murderers in exchange for a pardon for his Lincoln County War indictments, and it revealed an amazing boy. One should remember that Billy was born to the generation growing up with the Civil War's promise of equality for all, and even the Revolutionary War, just a century before, was still a vivid inspiration of democracy. In fact, the Lincoln County War freedom fighters had first named themselves regulators after pre-Revolutionary War insurgents. So Billy, just 3 months into being 19, wrote his letter, not as a suppliant, but as the equal to any man. In this case, the man was the governor of the territory. Billy blithely dispensed with Wallace's huge, dead or alive reward as merely a measure of his worth as a witness to Chapman's murder. And he turned the tables of power. He offered the bargain. Wallace could take it or leave it. He would testify in exchange for a pardon for what he called his Lincoln County War indictments. He left out that they were for the murders of Sheriff William Brady, Deputy George Hindeman, and Andrew Buckshot Roberts. The issue was that they were in the context of war, not wanton killings, and he needed to be rid of them, not just for his own sake, but because his enemies could use them to kill him. Unsaid is that they would hang him, and obviously if he was killed, he couldn't testify. To be noted is Billy's correct legalese. He asked not for a pardon, but for the annulment of his indictments, which he calls a nulli. That is the correct term before sentencing. Pardoning comes after sentencing. And he added character references from, quote, good citizens. He also alluded to the Lincoln County War freedom fight by stating that his peace meeting with James Dolan was to, quote, lay aside our arms. An added touch was that the letter, in his best Spencerian handwriting, was on fine paper. As will be seen in a later talk, that gave me clues about Billy's secret backers. And since Billy was a traumatized youth, still in search of a father figure, even included unconsciously in this letter is that longing. So Billy explained that the name Antrim, which he was sometimes called, was actually just his stepfather's name. He was still available for adoption. To be noted also is that in later life, hypocritical betrayer Lew Wallace would lie that he had made up the pardon bargain himself to capture the outlaw, Billy the Kid. On screen is Billy's March 13th, 1879 letter to Lew Wallace. Billy wrote, with his characteristic lack of capitalizing at start of sentences and capitalizing words for emphasis, as follows. To His Excellency the Governor, General Lew Wallace, Dear Sir, I have heard that you will give $1,000 for my body, which as I can understand it means alive as a witness. I know it is as a witness against those that murdered Mr. Chapman. If it was so, as that I could appear in court, I could give the desired information. But I have indictments against me for things that happened in the late Lincoln County War, and I'm afraid to give up because my enemies would kill me. The day Mr. Chapman was murdered, I was in Lincoln at the request of good citizens to meet Mr. J.J. Dolan, to meet as friends, so as to be able to lay aside our arms and go to work. I was present when Mr. Chapman was murdered and know who did it. And if it was not for those indictments, I would have made it clear before now. If it is in your power to annul those indictments, I hope you will do so as to give me a chance to explain. Please send me an answer telling me what you can do. You can send answer by bearer. I have no wish to fight any more. Indeed, I have not raised an arm since your proclamation. As to my character, I refer to any of the citizens, for the majority of them are my friends and have been helping me all they could. I am called Kid Antrim, but Antrim is my stepfather's name. Waiting an answer, I remain your obedient servant, W.H. Bonney. Wallace's answer came on March 15, 1879. He set a meeting in Justice of the Peace John Squire Wilson's Lincoln House at 9:00 p.m. on the 17th, and he responded to Billy's concern about being killed by his enemies by promising to make him safe. Wallace told Billy he could trust him, and he told Billy to keep the meeting secret. No description exists of the March 17th Billy Wallace meeting with Squire Wilson as witness, but Billy came away believing that Wallace agreed to his pardon bargain. But circumstances changed almost immediately. For the Chapman murder, Wallace had arrested James Dolan, Billy Campbell, and Jesse Evans. He jailed them in Fort Stanton, apparently ignoring that it was a ring stronghold. So 2 days after Wallace's meeting with Billy on the 19th, Campbell and Evans were allowed to escape. That led to Billy's concern that the pardon bargain would be canceled for less defendants to testify against. Resulting was a letter flurry on March 20th among Billy and Wallace, with Squire Wilson as go-between. To be noted is that Wallace was then in Fort Stanton, Wilson was in Lincoln, and though Billy gave his address as San Patricio, it was unlikely that he actually gave away his hideout. As will be seen in a later talk, he might have been hiding in Lincoln itself. On March 20th, Billy first wrote to Wilson, and as an incorrigible tease, he made fun of Wallace's letter of the 15th, telling him to keep their meeting secret. So he called Wallace, you know who. This is Billy's letter. On screen is Billy's letter of March 20th, 1879 to Justice of the Peace, John Squire Wilson. It stated, San Patricio, Thursday, 20th, 1879. Friend Wilson, please tell you-know-who that I do not know what to do now as those prisoners have escaped. So send word by bearer, a note through you. It may be that he has made different arrangements. If not, and he still wants it the same, to send William Hudgens as deputy to the junction tomorrow at 3:00 with some men you know to be all right. Send a note telling me what to do. W.H. Bonney. P.S. Do not send soldiers. Wallace responded to Billy's letter. As was his custom, he kept his draft. It stated that the prisoner's escape made no difference to their arrangements, and with ominous slyness he crossed out, "I will comply with my part, if you will with yours." Of course, Billy could not know that Wallace's betrayal of him was in the works, and Wallace agreed to Billy's plan for his sham imprisonment so he could be housed safely until his testifying. Billy responded. Here is his second letter to Wallace that day. On screen is Billy's second letter to Lew Wallace on March 20th, 1879. He wrote, San Patricio, Lincoln County, Thursday, 20th, 1879. General Lew Wallace, Sir, I will keep the appointment made, but be sure and have men come that you can depend on. I am not afraid to die like a man fighting, but I would not like to be killed like a dog unarmed. Tell Kimball, that was Sheriff Kimbrill, to let his men be placed around the house and for him to come in alone, and he can arrest us. All I am afraid of is that in the fort we might be poisoned or killed through a window at night, but you can arrange that all right. Tell the commanding officer to watch Lieutenant Goodwin. He would not hesitate to do anything. There will be danger on the road of somebody waylaying us to kill us on the road to the fort. You will never catch those fellows on the road. Watch Fritz's, Captain Baca's ranch, and the brewery. They will either go to Seven Rivers or to the Hickory Mountains. They will stay around close until the scouting parties come in. Give a spy a pair of glasses and let him get on the mountain back of Fritz's and watch. And if they are there, there will be provisions carried to them. It is not my place to advise you, but I am anxious to have them caught and perhaps know how men hide from soldiers better than you. Please excuse me for having so much to say, and I still remain yours truly, W.H. Bonney. P.S. I have changed my mind. Send Kimball to Gutierrez's just below San Patricio, 1 mile, because Sanger and Ballard are or were great friends of Camel's, meaning Billy Campbell. Ballard told me today, is crossed out, yesterday to leave, for you were doing everything to catch me. It was a blind to get me to leave. Tell Kimball not to come before 3 o'clock, for I may not be there before. These dangerous plans required Billy trusting Wallace. Arrest was what Billy had avoided for the past year, knowing he was a ring target, and he believed he'd be incarcerated at Fort Stanton, a ring stronghold. He referred specifically to Ringite Lieutenant Millard Fillmore Goodwin, who was possibly one of the white officers shooting at him and others during their escape from the burning McSween house in the Lincoln County War battle. Billy also realistically warned about his being assassinated on the way to a Fort Stanton incarceration. This is important to remember because in 2 months he would bravely choose to testify against its treasonous commander, N.A.M. Dudley, for his own anti-ring agenda, not for the pardon bargain. Thereby he risked that dangerous transport from Lincoln to the fort for 2 days of testifying in the military court of inquiry. Billy's letter also displays his literary skill. He wrote, I am not afraid to die like a man fighting, but would not like to be killed like a dog unarmed. Note his reference to being a fighting regulator soldier. And Cocky Billy also tried to enlist Wallace in that fight for justice, including giving that past Civil War general advice on how to capture the escapees. And he provided correct information that Charles Fritz, brother of Emil Fritz, the founder of the rings Lincoln mercantile monopoly called the House, might shelter Billy Campbell and Jesse Evans. Billy identified another ringite as Baca. That was Saturnina Baca, the Hispanic traitor in the Lincoln County War battle. And when Billy referred to, quote, arresting us for the sham jailing, he meant his friend and fellow regulator, Tom O'Phalliard, who was to accompany him. Billy's wry humor also came through. He wrote, quote, it is not my place to advise you, even though much of his letter did just that. And he added that, quote, perhaps I know how men hide from soldiers better than you. That was a not too subtle reference to Wallace's having unsuccessfully sent soldiers to capture him as an outlaw. Billy's overwrought excitement about this new father figure was evident even to him. He apologized in the letter's end for, quote, having so much to say, and he signed formally as W.H. Bonney. That was William Henry Bonney, his alias. His postscript was a hectic edition of precautions, and he made clear that their plans might not be as secret as Wallace thought, since Billy Campbell's friend had already tried to trick him into leaving instead of staying and testifying. So Billy well knew that everything depended on Wallace's honoring their bargain. And Billy's not wanting Sheriff Kimbrell to show up early in San Patricio to arrest him was another clue that he might not have been there when he wrote the letter. Billy believed he made a pardon bargain with Wallace. He also believed that, in Wallace, he had found an ally to fight the ring. With that optimism, he was sham arrested on March 21st, 1879, only 4 days after meeting Wallace face to face. And Billy had an unexpected boost to safety. His anti-ring Lincoln friend Juan Patron, the town jailer, offered to keep him in his home instead of putting him in dangerous Fort Stanton. And the key defendant was still in custody, local ring boss James Dolan. As will be seen in subsequent talks, incarcerated Billy's Lincoln next-door neighbor was Lew Wallace. Soon added to Billy's words was Wallace's interview of him. It will be discussed in my talks about my book, The Lost Pardon of Billy the Kid. And there was an additional letter Billy wrote to Wallace for the pardon bargain. It was unknown until I authenticated it. That will be in a talk of its own.